Hi. Um, ShortFatOtaku released a video the other day that got me thinking. Um, Actually, it was 2 days ago, but I watched it yesterday, and it got me thinking about age and my generation. For those who don't know it, I'm a little older than I look. I'm almost 40. And I have been thinking as of late about some of my life choices when it comes to career and so on and so forth. And that could be evident from from my collection of videos the last couple of years. Sorry, I'm testing out a new setup with light and I actually have my camera, or my cell phone more correctly, on the gimbal on a tripod, on an old tripod that I used to use when I worked as a video producer for a famous beverage company that shall not be named, but it's on my CV. Anyways, what I'm trying to do here is set up a better way for people to view what I'm actually trying to do here. I just wanted to check if I didn't have any porn on my computer screen. But what I've been thinking about as of late is the idea of ideas and youth. And what ShortFatOtaku was talking about in that video is that we're growing old. I'm not sure if I belong to Gen Z or if I belong to millennials, because I was born in December 1980. So there's a lot of different factors that go into which generation I go into, and there's also a lot of discussion on where that generational divide actually is. But and to a certain degree, the most Gen Z thing, no, Gen X, sorry, I said Gen Z, didn't I? The most Gen X thing would be, first of all, to forget that it's Gen X and not Gen Z, and secondly, that you don't know whether or not you belong to Gen X, because it seems like everyone has forgotten about Gen X in this entire debate, really. It's all about the millennials, which I'm not sure whether or not I belong to, because I'm, sort of caught right in the middle of those two generations. But it still got me thinking, because he was talking about how a lot of people are starting to act in the same type of manner that I remember grown-ups or adults were doing during the 1990s, with both the sort of anti-role-playing, which was more in the 80s, I guess, but in Norway it didn't reach us until the 1980s. A sort of panic over role-playing game, and I was one of the kids that would play role-playing games, and it got me, and sort of, I don't consider myself to be acting in that kind of way at all, but it's still sort of got me thinking about other things, and one of them is the sort of perpetual youth thing, the Peter Pan thing, that you sort of, you have this idea that as long as you're in youth, you can do anything. And there is sort of this idea, I guess, that kids of the baby boom generation, of the baby boomers, feel, because it's, and though that applies to a certain degree to some Gen Xers, and also to millennials, that you have sort of been told, because they were in the generation of the Summer of Love and the hippies and so on. They sort of, to a certain degree, didn't want to become like their parents, so they kind of advised not to go down that route, while also, to a certain degree, making it harder for people of the next generation to climb the ladder that they had already climbed. Because it's this sort of idea that because they live longer, and because they sort of inhabit the places that they inherited from their generation, which was the greatest generation in common parlance, that they sort of, there's this picture, and I've had this picture in my mind as well, that they don't give that seat up for the next generation, which to a certain degree is true of the people of Gen X, and also for millennials, because if you see, for instance, the I think it's a combination of the perpetual youth culture that was sort of started broadcasting during the Summer of Love, or the 1968 generation, and also the idea that you could always change something in your life. And that's just it. I think that one of the reasons why people feel a little bit lost and don't really know where to go is because there isn't any guidance anymore. One of the reasons that I think that I felt lost for so many years is because there's no idea of mentorship anymore. There's no idea of guidance, of trying to find a way. There's no obligated apprenticeship anymore, at least in Norway, when it comes to jobs that you do. You feel obligated to just, especially when you get out of college, you feel obligated to sort of get a job immediately without doing the apprenticeship. And the apprenticeship is actually quite important for any sort of understanding, for any sort of job. And because the environment is also so fast-paced and so fast changing, it becomes very hard to understand exactly what you need to do to have that kind of stability. So even though this, I was thinking of naming this video "Am I Too Old?" and that is also something that's been going through my mind, sort of wrestling with the idea that, am I too old to make it as a writer? Because I'm almost 40. I haven't had that breakthrough screenplay. I haven't had that breakthrough book. I haven't had that breakthrough article. But I still think that that my ideas have some merit, and that I can contribute something to actually save this way of doing things online. So I don't think I'm too old. But I do understand the idea that I can't remain an irresponsible youth at the age of, or at the level 40, at level 40, as much as I sort of, as much as I may want to, that's not how it's done. And I think that's one of the benefits of my thinking right now, is that we need to look into the way of redoing this. We need to think about how do we secure a more meaningful transition from kid to young adult to adulthood. How do we do it? And I wrote an article a few years back about, not an article, really, a blog post, more correctly, about how I think we're missing a sort of a rite of passage, especially for young men, maybe even for young women as well. I don't know. Even though they have more of a natural marker for when they transition from girl into young woman. Males used to have that in every society. At all times, there had to be a rite of passage, and you had to pass it. You had to go through it to be able to call yourself a man. And we don't have that anymore. And I think that is just as much a problem as anything else. And to say, I was in an online discussion earlier today with a guy who said, well, at some point personal responsibility has to kick in, and you have to take responsibility for your own actions. Yeah, well, if you don't know any better, if you haven't had any proper guidance, and if your parents haven't had any proper guidance, how do you do it? How do you know where to look? How do you know where to dig? How do you know? If you haven't had any guidance in life, how do you know? So anyway, that's my thoughts on those subjects. That from a almost 40-year-old man who's just feeling a bit old today. Have a nice day.